The Brandon Aiyuk social media meltdown has reached a new level. Multiple posts in one day, and on top of that, Richard Sherman has completely invalidated the theory that the 49ers somehow mistreated Brandon Aiyuk. We'll get into that. First, the post, or one of the many today. Brandon Aiyuk said, I almost forgot the best wide receiver in the world. I'm not so sure about that, but even he acknowledged that it might be a lie, it might be cap. And then he said this.
And if I'm crazy or if I'm capping, so them boys cut me today. And I'll sign with the Commanders tomorrow. And we'll see who capping.
So again, a plea to be cut. And he said, if you cut me today, I'll sign with the Commanders tomorrow. But why should the 49ers cut Brandon Aiyuk today? What do they have to benefit from cutting Brandon Aiyuk today? The answer is nothing. In fact, Brandon Aiyuk, again, I'll repeat this in case you haven't been watching the previous shows. And I know that we got to take a day off from this yesterday because I don't think that Brandon Aiyuk posted and I was out of tight end use. So we came out with a much more interesting video than having to cover all of these posts. But Brandon Aiyuk has to apply for reinstatement in writing. He's got to send a letter to the NFL and to the 49ers to get off of the left squad list. At that point, the 49ers might consider cutting him so he doesn't step into their building. But right now, it's like Jamal Adams with his key card going up to the facility and not being able to get in. You guys remember that video? I think it was a joke video, but that would actually happen if Brandon Aiyuk tried to show up to the 49ers facility. If he tried to go to the Bay Area, he probably would get arrested. There's a warrant out for his arrest in Santa Clara County right now for the misdemeanor speeding by Levi's Stadium that he himself posted to YouTube. So it's not as simple as the 49ers just waking up and wanting to release Brandon Aiyuk. He actually has to take action so that the 49ers might be incentivized to do that. He's had a chance to put the 49ers' feet to the fire throughout all of spring, and he didn't do it. There's still a subset of insane Commanders fans, and I'll just go out and say it, like insane Commanders accounts that somehow think that Brandon Aiyuk has been mistreated by the 49ers. And I'm sure there's some 49ers commentators who might say the same thing. That has long been an extremely unreasonable position to take. And Richard Sherman on his podcast gave us some background as to why the 49ers initially voided Brandon Aiyuk's guarantees in more specificity and detail than we've ever had, that essentially confirms that the 49ers did not miss. It essentially confirms that the 49ers did not mistreat Brandon Aiyuk. I'm sorry, I accidentally X'd out of the page. How embarrassing. But we are back now. The problem is that I lost my Richard Sherman podcast clip that I wanted to play. So I'm going to get it right now and just have a listen to Richard Sherman.
Now everybody's like, well, what did the 49ers do to him? They disrespected him. They didn't. They paid him $30 million to catch the football. They paid him $30 million to show up to play receiver for the San Francisco 49ers. Not be owned, not be anything. Like it's pay, goods and services. You get paid for your services. You have to provide the services.
Novel concept.
You don't get to just get paid and say, I'm not going to play receiver. I'm just going to chill. I'm just going to do whatever I want. You don't get to get paid and then say, hey, I'm not going to rehab with the team, which is fine, which is perfectly fine. You cannot rehab.
All right, now listen to this next part. So, yeah, Richard Sherman outlines it like a sane human being. He says that Brandon Aiyuk was paid to provide a service. $120 million was the total value of the contract he signed in 2024. $48.1 million was actually paid out to him, and then he decided to leave. On top of that, or even before that, he decided to not follow some of the terms of the contract after he had gotten injured. And this is where Richard Sherman gets into some of those details.
The team, many players have done it, But if you do that, you have to show up 4 days earlier than everybody else, Mitchell. 4 days. If everybody else has to show up on the 23rd, you have to show up on the 19th. You know why? Because the team that invested $30 million a year in you wants to evaluate you and
Another
see how
novel
your
concept.
rehab has gone. They want to do MRIs. They want to do testing, and they want to do it at a time that 90 other players aren't there.
So that's what Brandon Aiyuk didn't do. I think it was July 23rd that it was the first day veterans report the training camp, the deadline in 2025. 4 days earlier, as Richard Sherman just told us, because very clearly he's got inside information here, July 19th is when he was supposed to show up. He didn't show up. So the consequences has rolled in. Here is the rest of what Richard had to say.
And really focus on you. So all the doctors can show you true attention and focus and give you the care and the understanding that you need so that they can truly understand where you're at in your process. Not because they want to just screw Brandon Aiyuk. No, you haven't rehabbed here. We have no idea where you are. You haven't updated us at all. So if you could show up 4 days early, which is protocol, standard for anybody who hasn't rehabbed at the facility, and it's perfectly fine. He didn't do that. So they fined him every day he didn't show up, which is 4 days, $50,000 a day. Mitchell, you're great at math. And then he gave him an avenue to void his guarantees. That's what happened.
I think Richard Sherman is not lying. I think Richard Sherman is laying it out there exactly as it progressed. So we knew in December last year that the 49ers had voided Aiyuk's guarantees. We knew that it had something to do with something that happened even before training camp. Kyle Shanahan hinted at that. That was it. Richard Sherman just shared it on his podcast, and go check out his podcast. Richard does a great, great job. I always knew that he would have a career in media after his playing days, and there you have it. He's got a career in media and a successful one after his playing days. 4 days before the start of training camp is when the 49ers contractually mandated Brandon Aiyuk to be in the building. He did not do that. Now, the reason you should go listen to Richard's podcast is because he gets into the psychology of this, and I think that he hit something on the head there as well. He said that Brandon Aiyuk's discontent went back all the way to the Super Bowl. And this is something that we could do a whole video on at a later date, especially once all of this is resolved. But he said that something really, really tormented and bothered Brandon Aiyuk coming out of that Super Bowl. I mean, likely the fact that he was getting open, but because of a blocking missed assignment, and we all know what happened with Spencer Burford against Chris Jones up front. Brock Purdy didn't have time to find him for what would have been the Super Bowl winning touchdown. And, you know, Richard speaks from great experience when he discusses how losing a Super Bowl in gut-wrenching, dramatic fashion can have lasting negative effects. Because he even mentioned this on the podcast. He was on the team where Russell Wilson threw the ball intended for Ricardo Lockett that ended up in Malcolm Butler's hands. They didn't hand off to Marshawn Lynch. That would have been 2 in a row for the Seattle Seahawks. Instead, they did not win another Super Bowl with that group. Obviously, they got back there and won this past year, but that wasn't the Pete Carroll, Richard Sherman Seahawks anymore. That was the beginning of the end for what had been a burgeoning dynasty. You saw a lot of discontent after that in Seattle. You saw Richard Sherman yelling at Russell Wilson at practice. You saw Earl Thomas flipping off the Seattle Seahawks sideline after he got hurt. I believe it was a torn ACL or some kind of fracture for Earl Thomas a couple years after that. And you could trace it all back to the moment that the Seahawks blew that Super Bowl. So Sherman's point was that the 49ers losing that Super Bowl in gut-wrenching fashion had a lasting effect on Brandon Aiyuk that dragged out into contract negotiations in 2024 when he was up for the extension. And where this truly went wrong is that as a professional, it was Brandon Aiyuk's duty. And the 49ers had a duty on the other side. But I'll talk about Aiyuk's failure at the, very ground zero moment here. And then I'll talk about the 49ers failure. But it was Aiyuk's duty as a professional to flush all of that before he signed a contract to play football and catch passes for the San Francisco 49ers for worth up to $30 million per year. He either should have determined that he was not able to get over the bad residual feelings from that Super Bowl and asked to be traded and followed through with the trade consummation, which he didn't do, right? He would have had to agree to a new contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers, who wanted to trade for him. I think the Patriots also wanted to trade for him. I think the Browns were interested as well. Brandon Aiyuk didn't do that. He kind of played both sides of it, right? He stared at a contract offer from the 49ers for over 3 weeks before he finally signed. He finally told Kyle Shanahan, I'm going to sign here. Shanahan had to run upstairs and say, no, don't trade him. So, like, I think the Steelers are probably the only place that he gave the green light to, but that was the only place that the 49ers didn't want to trade him to. Either way, Brandon Aiyuk did not discard of the past the way that a professional should discard of the past before he took the money with the 49ers. And those poor feelings and that lack of buy-in that was connected to that carried over into the 2024 season, where Aiyuk was bad over the first 7 weeks before he tore his ACL. Did not participate in training camp, dropped several big passes. I mean, I still remember the dime he dropped from Brock Purdy against the Jets in the corner of the end zone. I remember the third down pass on the crosser that he dropped from Purdy against the Rams in week 3 that probably cost the 49ers that game, which started the real tailspin for San Francisco. And then he dropped a big one, another dime from Purdy in week 7 against the Chiefs that might have cost the 49ers the game. A few minutes later, he tore his ACL. And that's the last time that we've seen Brandon Aiyuk on the field. But it's very important to remember that he wasn't very good from week 1 to 7 after he signed the contract. And Sherman, the point he made was that he let the negative feelings, plural, I mean, all the crap from the Super Bowl loss, all that frustration, he let that carry over into contract negotiations. And then even after he decided to sign with the 49ers, he hadn't flushed it. And he let it carry over into 2024. And then everything got compounded by the fact that he was hurt. So obviously, Aiyuk did not act like a professional. He did not do what he should have done, especially when the 49ers were willing to pay him. And when he signed on the dotted line, accepting the money. When you accept that much money, it is your professional responsibility to be a professional and deliver the services. The team delivers the money, you deliver the services. Now, where the 49ers made their mistake is that they saw the weirdness in 2024 over the course of the contract negotiation. The 49ers were obviously very tempted to trade Brandon Aiyuk. They got very close to trading Brandon Aiyuk. And I think in retrospect, we can say they should have traded Brandon Aiyuk. They should have interpreted the warning signs, him staring at a contract. I mean, generational wealth, right? They're offering him $30 million a year, and it took him over 3 weeks to sign the thing. They got to the point where they were about to rescind it and trade him to the Steelers, but they didn't quite get there. They decided that they were so desperate to try to win a Super Bowl in 2024. They needed an ex-receiver. They wanted to run it back. They decided to pay Brandon Aiyuk instead, and they almost instantly regretted it. It really makes you wonder, had the 49ers won that Super Bowl, had a couple things bounced a different way, maybe one thing bounced a different way in that Super Bowl 58 against the Chiefs, what would the situation look like now? Would Aiyuk have been a happy camper leaving that Super Bowl if he had caught the winning touchdown? Would he have signed without drama? Would we not be seeing this social media meltdown now? Would he not have gotten hurt in 2024? You know, you're talking about a domino effect of things. Would everything be rosy for the 49ers? Would they be on, 2024, 2025, 2026? Like, would they have won a three-peat after? I don't know. I'm just really thinking as to the negative domino effect of what happened in Las Vegas. Or, Mike brought up another possibility. Would the 49ers have potentially traded Brandon Aiyuk that offseason because they wouldn't have been as desperate to try to run it back and win a Super Bowl in 2024? I think that's actually the more likely scenario. Had the 49ers won Super Bowl 58, I think that Brandon Aiyuk would have gone the way of Tyreek Hill away from the Kansas City Chiefs after they won a Super Bowl. I think it was 2 years after they won. I think he was still with them in 2020. But the Chiefs were comfortable enough to trade Tyreek Hill away to Miami, and they got a haul in return. And, well, Kansas City's receiving room has worsened, but obviously they went on to win 2 more Super Bowls even after Tyreek Hill left. I think that Mike is spot on. I think that it would not have been a smooth contract negotiation with Brandon Aiyuk, regardless of a Super Bowl win or a Super Bowl loss. And I think the 49ers would have been in a much more confident place to potentially trade him after that 2023 season. And then they would have gotten pieces in return, probably draft capital, and who knows what they would have done with that draft capital. We're going way too far down the hypothetical line at this point. But it is, to me, undeniable, especially after listening to Richard Sherman, who's an expert on such dynamics, especially after listening to him, it's undeniable that what happened in that Super Bowl had disastrous downstream effects, obviously for the 49ers. And I think for Brandon Aiyuk, because to me, I mean, he's lost it in so many ways. We go back to this post, and who knows? Maybe it comes out that he's acting on the advice of his agent to try to force his way out of San Francisco. But I think there's like a 0.5% chance, maybe a 0.1% chance of that being true. I don't think that this is coming from a place of good guidance. We've seen social media posts, videos deleted, the ones where he called the 49ers stupid for paying him that contract in 2024. We have seen daily drama. At this point, it's daily, that just doesn't make sense. We've seen him say here that he is the best wide receiver in the world, a statement that is hard to get behind. I think he was fantastic in 2023 for the 49ers, but to say that you're the best wide receiver in the world, even if you thought you were the best one in 2023, to say it a couple years later after not having played an actual NFL football game, a couple years removed from a severe knee injury, seems like a stretch. Actions speak so much louder than words. And I've analyzed this contract situation from the start as a fairly simple one. If Aiyuk just showed up this is before the left squad list, if he just showed up and acted like a professional from the beginning, he'd be $30 million richer because he'd still have the guarantees this year. And Richard Sherman actually pointed this out on his podcast. He said the 49ers probably, if he would have just acted like a professional throughout the whole thing, would have tried to trade him if he requested that this offseason. And he probably would have had some value. Like if Aiyuk had rehabbed diligently at the team facility, checked in, didn't have to do all the rehab at the facility, but checked in when he was supposed to on July 19th of last year, 4 days before the start of training camp. He was running 22 miles an hour around week 6, 7, or 8, according to George Kittle, and stopping on a dime. So it seems like he was close to returning and playing for the 49ers. So if he had returned, delivered for San Francisco, they definitely had a spot for him on last year's team because they were lacking wide receivers. If he had looked good, his trade value would have shot through the roof. He could have demanded a trade this offseason, and the 49ers, with Mike Evans coming available in free agency, really might have obliged Brandon Aiyuk. Like, just acting like a professional probably would have gotten Brandon Aiyuk $30 million more dollars and his desired destination. And now, because he didn't do that, we have daily posts that look like this, demands to be released that don't really hold up to a smell test because, again, let me just extend the previous train of thought. Even after the mess started, if Aiyuk would have just followed rational courses of action, he could have forced the 49ers to put him into the position that he's asking for through social media on a daily basis right now. And by that, I mean, if he would have applied for reinstatement back in March, gotten it granted by the NFL, he could have showed up to the 49ers facility in April during the offseason program, and he might have been released then and there. And then if Washington really wanted him, which I'm not sure about, but I mean, we'll see, then he could have signed with the Commanders. I mean, instead, you now have this dynamic. Adam Schefter, this is what he said today on ESPN. I think every time he opens his mouth, he damages his standing with other teams, and he scares other teams from bringing him into their organization. In speaking with teams, everybody's saying, what's wrong with this guy right now? It's unsettling to watch him, and it's scary to see how he's handling himself. By the way, he's still a member of the 49ers, the team that paid him, and he's saying, go Commanders. In a previous video, he said that the 49ers are stupid for paying him. Schefter continues by saying, I even asked Washington their thoughts on signing Brandon Aiyuk. Maybe for all we know, they're planning on doing it. But I know, having spoken to them leading up to the draft, they had some questions at that point in time. And I would imagine they still exist. You know why they have questions? Because we haven't seen this guy running around on a football field. We haven't seen him catching a pass. We've seen him kicking a soccer ball, but that's the wrong sport. That's the wrong football. That's not the football that the Commanders care about. That's not the football that the rest of the NFL might be interested in. So instead, we have Brandon Aiyuk taking to social media, and the best analogy that I can come up with is the guy that's trying to fight someone outside the bar or even inside the bar. And it's Aiyuk trying to fight the 49ers, but he's not really fighting the 49ers because the bouncers, there's two big bouncers holding him back. So he can't, it's easy to be really tough when you can't actually swing and engage into a fight, when you can't actually get hit. But in order to actually take on the 49ers and get what he says he wants, Brandon Aiyuk would have to, again, apply for reinstatement, maybe even show up, maybe even go through a physical. That would all be up to the 49ers if they wanted to subject Brandon Aiyuk to that. But that's what an actual fight here would look like. It's not going to be determined through Instagram posts. It just isn't. That doesn't bother the 49ers. They're sitting here like the rest of the league, a little bit concerned. Like, what's this guy doing? Like, what's the end game here? Why? Talk to us through your actions. Kyle Shanahan always says, I'm a big talk to me through your actions guy, not through your words. I don't care what you post on Instagram. If you want to get released, then take the steps to make us uncomfortable, to make us release you. Like that's what is truly, truly crazy to me, that the path is right there. We've made several videos about it, but Brandon Aiyuk just doesn't seem to care to take it, which leads me to question whether or not he actually wants to play football moving forward, or if he just wants the attention on social media, because now those posts are coming at a greater and greater regularity. Again, those of you just joining, I know we've got a big live working today. Aiyuk also posted a football with a Commanders logo on it. I don't know if he got it from Jaden Daniels or somebody else, but he said the best sport in the world, the best league in the world, and the best team in the world. That preceded his post, which was just a photo, and I almost forgot, the best wide receiver in the world, which we question, obviously, which preceded the video right here.
And if I'm crazy or if I'm capping, so them boys cut me today. And I'll sign with the Commanders tomorrow. And we'll see who capping.
I mean, it has not. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of the situation. He's saying, if I'm lying, if I'm not the greatest receiver in the world, then cut me, and you'll see the Commanders sign me tomorrow. The 49ers have never denied that Brandon Aiyuk, when he's healthy, when he's available, is a good football player. They've never disparaged his abilities as a player. They ended up paying him, instead of trading him, $30 million per year. Aiyuk seems to think that the 49ers don't believe in his abilities. The opposite is true. They paid you, dude. Like they paid you more money than a lot of people thought you should have made. I, at the time, assuming Brandon Aiyuk was going to deliver what he had from the start of his 49ers career through 2023, I thought that contract was fair. It obviously wasn't fair given how this has gone off the rails since then, but there was a big debate at the time exactly how much should Brandon Aiyuk make. And he ended up signing for $30 million per year on the average, and then obviously there was the guaranteed money. There were a lot of guarantees. The 49ers saddled themselves with a lot of guarantees. Probably the biggest break that's moved in the 49ers' favor is that Aiyuk, again, very irrationally, didn't show up to the facility when he was supposed to at a training camp in 2025, allowed the 49ers to void those guarantees, didn't even fight back. That was really weird at the time too, and expected the 49ers to, just cut him loose after paying him $48.1 million for 7 games. It doesn't work that way. You get paid and then you deliver services. The payment only comes when the services are delivered. And if you sign a big contract that guarantees you payment ahead of when the services come, like Aiyuk did, well, if you don't honor your half of it, the team is going to try to salvage as much as it can after you've betrayed your portion of the agreement. So the 49ers can come and they can try to claw back money of the $48.1 million that they paid Brandon Aiyuk. They can use the Aiyuk social media posts, like the one where he's yelling "Go Commanders" the other day, against him in a grievance. They could say, hey, this guy was under contract with us. We paid him all this money, and here he is violating clauses very clearly in the contract, cheering for another team. You're not allowed to do that. Here he is calling us stupid for paying him nearly $50 million since he signed. That's all stuff that an arbitrator is probably going to assign in the 49ers' favor in any potential grievance, if there is one. I think, and I'm not completely versed on how all this would work since it is so unprecedented, but once Aiyuk is no longer on the 49ers, that's when the 49ers could potentially go after some of the $48.1 million already paid. That could come back as a salary cap credit if they do get some of that money back. But there have been several breaches of contract from Aiyuk's side. And I think the 49ers are being very careful from their side to make sure all business is buttoned up. For example, with the left squad list, to put a player on the left squad list, which is what the 49ers did last December, you have to let him know in writing 5 days ahead of the actual placement on the left squad list that this is what you plan to do. He's got 5 days to report at that point. The 49ers made sure that they went through every legal checklist to make sure that they were covered here because this situation is so weird. So they sent Aiyuk the letter. The letter very formally, very clearly said, you need to show up within the next 5 days or we're putting you on the left squad list where we don't have to pay you. They did that. Aiyuk didn't respond, or at least he didn't show up within 5 days, and they put him on the left squad list. They crossed the T's. They dotted the I's. They took care of that situation, and I'm sure that they've got all the different possibilities legally accounted for moving forward here into 2026. And I can tell you that legally the next thing that would have to happen from Brandon Aiyuk's point of view would be a reinstatement, an application through writing for reinstatement before he could even show up and start to put the pressure on the 49ers at the team facility. I would assume that the last thing the 49ers would like to do is allow Brandon Aiyuk to take the practice field. So if he does force his way back in, the physical would be a point of contention in all likelihood. And then, of course, if he passed that and he was in a position where he had to take the practice field and the 49ers couldn't stop him, I think that's what would ultimately force the release. But we're not at that spot yet. We're sitting here on June 24th, a month away from the date that the 49ers report, and we haven't seen an update on the Brandon Aiyuk willingness to actually force an issue at this point. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the tight end U coverage yesterday. I'm going to answer a few of your questions. I know we got people still filing in here, 1,000 of you, or 999, 30 minutes into the show, and now there's 1,025 of you. So now I think it's time to talk. I think we've reached a point where, look, we got a Commanders fan. Maybe. He says, go Commanders. And he likes the show. So maybe he's got Aiyuk maybe it's Aiyuk himself. That would be funny. But maybe a reasonable Commanders fan. Now, I don't mean to speak about all Commanders fans when I said that there was just some insanity out there. But there are these fan accounts out there that say, okay, all this can happen, and then Brandon Aiyuk is going to be a Commander, and they completely skip over the part that he needs to be cut by the 49ers first. Now, maybe they shock all of us and cut him tomorrow. Fine, then he could sign with the Commanders. But you can't skip over the most important part of the entire equation. The guy can't be on the 49ers if he wants to go to Commanders training camp. So I think you got a lot of people on the Washington side of this, online at least, or maybe it's just content creators online for Washington trying to get clicks, who are not living in reality, who are just acting like Brandon Aiyuk can wish his way to the Commanders. We don't even know if the Commanders want him on their football team, and that would be after the 49ers cut him. There really is not evidence of that, unless you consider the evidence to be Brandon Aiyuk posting a bunch of Commander stuff. He posted Deion Sanders wearing a Redskins jersey today because Deion was with Washington in 2000. That was toward the end of Deion's career. So, I mean, I can't believe that it's reached this level. I can't believe that we likely have over a month still left of this. But anytime that some new information comes out, and this is not just about the Aiyuk post, I think the Richard Sherman podcast today was new information. He let us know exactly what happened, that Aiyuk didn't show up. He was supposed to be there 4 days early to the 49ers training camp last year. And then you really go listen to Richard in the entirety of that podcast, because his analysis of where Brandon Aiyuk might have been psychologically following the Super Bowl makes things make a whole lot more sense to me. I mean, there still is a lot of irrational behavior here, but to trace it back to the frustration coming out of that Super Bowl loss, and to hear that from somebody like Richard Sherman, who saw a great team in the Seattle Seahawks fall apart more slowly, obviously, than Brandon Aiyuk was falling apart, but also fall apart after a Super Bowl loss, that really did crystallize this with some perspective for me. It might really be Brandon Aiyuk. He's going bowling with Dan Quinn tonight, but we got to keep that quiet because that'd be tampering. Now, the greatest plot twist in the history of plot twists would be if this was actually Brandon Aiyuk giving me some of the $30 million a year that the 49ers paid him, some of the $48.1 million going on to the show here. Now, I don't think it is, but you never say enough. This saga has gotten so weird that if this was the actual Brandon Aiyuk, it would be part of the 30 for 30 that they made on the saga about 15 years from now. What if I told you that Brandon Aiyuk, instead of showing up to the 49ers building, got on David Lombardi's YouTube channel and started giving him super chats, $5 at a time, as part of his bid to get released? Ryan asking, the 49ers claw back money? Yes, but as I just explained, I don't think they could do that while Aiyuk is still on the team. I think he would actually have to be released or traded first, and then they could go back. It would have to happen through a grievance, and then the way that you claw it back is that generally in situations like this, it's not paid back to the bank account of the team from the player. What you do is you get some of the contract money that Brandon Aiyuk makes in the future, if there is a case where he makes some money in the future. I don't know exactly how this would all function. Say that Brandon Aiyuk's done, never plays again, but the 49ers still want some of the money back, and an arbitrator rules that they can't have some of the money back, but Brandon Aiyuk doesn't pay it, and the 49ers' next step would be to go to court, and they don't want to go to court. I do wonder if maybe they would get a salary cap break on the money, but not get the money back itself. Does that make sense? I don't know how the league would adjudicate that. So that's a bridge that we'll cross once we actually get to it. Thank you. Here's somebody who's not Brandon Aiyuk coming through. I appreciate it. And I'll answer a few more questions. Can the 49ers force Aiyuk to play out the contract if he showed up? Well, you can't force anybody to take the field, right? Like, at some point, there's got to be some free will. You can't drag the guy out onto the field and force him to play. But yeah, you don't have to release him if you're the 49ers. You could say, we signed you to play for us. We don't feel like releasing or trading you. You can make him sit around until that contract expired. So the clock is on your side if you're the 49ers. I think that the issue here is that if he's reinstated and if he shows up, and if he passes the physical, or if, whatever happens to put him in line to get him on the practice field, the 49ers have to let him on the practice field. Otherwise, he can file the grievance with NFLPA, and the 49ers will probably lose that if he does everything right. And the 49ers don't want him on the practice field because he can get hurt there. And if he gets hurt there, then some of those guarantees can reactivate. And if you're already done with a player, then the last thing you want is for his guarantees to reactivate. I mean, the 49ers have essentially already gotten out of Dodge by being able to void his guarantees this year. So the last thing you'd want to do after successfully voiding his guarantees this year, something that Aiyuk didn't fight, which is weird to me, by the way, but I guess maybe he thought, the only way that I could think that Brandon Aiyuk looks a little less selfish here is if he let the guarantees void on purpose as a show of goodwill to the 49ers, trying to get released, seeing if, okay, hey, I'm willing to give up these guarantees. Now you can cut me. But that's still not an even trade, and it's not a deal that the 49ers would accept, nor should they as a smart business. It's like, dude, just because you gave up $30 million doesn't mean that you haven't already taken $48.1 million and hardly played. It doesn't work that way. Fine. Give back the other $48 million, and then we might talk about releasing you. That might be the 49ers stance on this situation. But anyway, they don't want him taking a practice field again just because of the risk that they would expose themselves to. A lot of people can't wait for July 25th. Yeah, that's going to be the actual start of training camp, and then we'll see if this saga takes another step. Those of you who are sick of talking about Brandon Aiyuk, well, I'm sorry that we have to talk about it, but it's what happened today. More posts came out. But if you're sick and tired of it, you can go watch yesterday's video. I mean, we still have had a lot of people watching that video. It is from Tight End U. It's got 45,000 views already. A lot, and 564 people have watched it in the last hour. We've got intel and interviews with Brock Purdy, with Mac Jones, with George Kittle, and with Kyle Juszczyk, all of whom cannot wait for July 25th. So make sure you go check that out. The last day of Tight End U was awesome. Closed out by Taylor Swift at the concert, dedicating a song to George Kittle. He requested Love Story, and they played it. And she shouted out to George Kittle on the stage. The 49ers will not get a compensatory pick when Aiyuk signs with the Commanders. The only way that you can get a comp pick in the NFL is if a player finishes out his contract with you. If you cut him early or if you trade him, you're not going to get a compensatory pick. Do I think that Carver Willis will see the field this year on the offensive line? I think it might take an injury. I would think that Connor Colby in year 2, they've seemed impressed with some of the strides that he's making, would be further up on the pecking order. And then there's Robert Jones, the free agent who they have added, who I think is the favorite to start at that left guard position. Now, Carver, maybe he is able to slot in as backup center. Maybe he picks that up quickly. And if something happens to Jake Brendel, maybe he sees the field. But again, that would necessitate an injury. Given his behavior, do we even think that Brandon Aiyuk steps on a football field again? I have my doubts. And I think it's fair for me to have my doubts. But I can also say I really don't know. And I think a lot of people are in the dark, including Adam Schefter, whom we've heard from. Marcus says, "You're welcome," because I said thank you. Keep preaching the truth. And he says that the 49ers need to consider retiring Aldon Smith's number 99 jersey. Rest in peace, Aldon. Sad situation. They released 36 doves into the air for 36 years of life at Aldon Smith's memorial service. And obviously our prayers with his family, with his friends. I know Delaney Walker was also on those 49ers teams. He was at tight end U yesterday. I didn't have a chance to talk and catch up with Delaney. Nice guy. And obviously his time on the 49ers overlapped with Aldon Smith, who's gone too soon at the age of 36. Dave says, I think Sherman is really good insight of the situation, and I think he's spot on. I mean, it was obvious that Richard Sherman was speaking insider information. He knew exactly why they voided those guarantees. He talked to somebody in the 49ers building, and he got information that had not yet been made public. And I thought that I would bring that to you in this show. Speaking of tight ends, the 49ers wanted Gerald Everett in 2017, but the Rams took him, so the 49ers had to grab Kittle in the 5th, thanks to the Rams. And a reminder of the crapshoot that's the NFL draft. You win some, you lose some. It's about the aggregate score, and I think the 49ers' aggregate score has not been bad. Yep, I've said this before. I would think, I don't know about the NFLPA, but I know that the owners in the league, who essentially are represented by Roger Goodell, would definitely want the 49ers to stand their ground. You don't want guys signing massive deals and then forcing their way out successfully. It's not good for any business. You don't want to set bad precedent. So I would assume that the 49ers have some backing from the rest of the league. Well, this is cool. Your show and Richard Sherman's shows are the best shows on YouTube. I think Richard said it how it is today. So you should all go check out his podcast. Everybody, thanks for watching. It's been fun. I've got to go watch the baby here for a little bit. Baby Lombardi, 100th percentile, 99th percentile. That's more realistic. 99th percentile height. Everybody hit that subscribe button. Hit the like button. If you do that, you support the show. You help boost us further into the algorithm. We'll talk to you soon.